Welcome, everybody, to this exciting webinar, which is a collaboration, actually, between myself, I'm Emma Fitchett, and the beautiful Diomira D'Agostino. Hi, Diomira.
Hello, thank you so much.
So today we are going to be talking about the living mythology of the land. Diomira and I met in France last year on a lavender initiation and discovered that we have quite similar experiences of initiation through the plants and through the beings of our respective lands. And actually, Diomira, you've spent quite a bit of time here in the UK, haven't you? And so we just thought, yeah, let's share this because this subject of connecting to the land, connecting to nature, connecting to the earth is so important right now. And so there might be quite a few of you who don't know me and don't know Diomira. So my name's Emma Fitchett. I'm a plant spirit healer, shamanic teacher, author, and producer of a flower essence range, the Plant Consciousness Apothecary. And I have been working with geomancy. I'm trained in geomancy as well, which is working with the earth energies. And through the plants and the trees that I have been working with for many years, the spirits of, I have connected to the beautiful telluric forces of the land, but also the beings that live there and the other realms within the land. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you today about that. Diomira.
Thank you so much, Emma. I'm so excited to be here with all of you, weaving in the conversation of the mythic realms. So, I am a flower essence healer, a soul astrologer. At the heart of what I do is mythic embodiment, is also, I would say, a spiritual ecologist. And for probably the last 20 years, I have been traversing many lands, many sacred sites, but also sitting and listening to the whispers of the land, the whispers of the web of life, and that beautiful otherworld ecology that rises up from the land to interact and engage with us. My journey began with a whole lot of soul searching and finding and remembering and forgetting and remembering again. And it took me into a very deep process of healing and and transforming who I thought I was at the deepest level. And so now I co-create with the spirits of the land here where I live, where I call home. I'm so honored to do that. And I hope to be bringing a little piece of that into our conversation today. So thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. So let's define what we mean by mythology, because this can kind of bring up lots of kind of different concepts for people about what we're actually talking about when we're talking about the living mythology of the earth. How do you understand that?
So the living mythology of the earth, what needs to be said when we talk about myth is that a lot of times we think of these old dead stories that have no relevance to us today, or if they do have relevance, it's simply at a an allegorical, metaphorical level, right? Where we can work with them in those ways to support psychological processes. But when we are talking about mythic, Emma and I, in this context, we are talking about something that is alive, something that is living, and something that each and every one of us can and are being invited to step into and engage with at this time on the planet. And so the mythic is not imaginary. The mythic is not exclusive to reality. It's why I like to say mythic reality. The mythic is just as real as this mundane world. In fact, it's actually more real because it connects us into the primordial heart of who we are at that soul and spirit level, and also who the earth is at that soul and spirit level, and then invites us into a co-working relationship with her. But I'd love to hear how you think of
Yeah,
mythic as
yeah.
well.
Likewise, I echo that. And I think for me, mythology, and for a lot of people, conjures up this idea of like really expansive lengths of time. And so we are talking about things that are really old, absolutely. You know, this is the ancient memory of the earth, but it's still alive. And so it's very present. And that's the beauty of what we're talking about. So in my tradition, which I'm Celtic, so I'm in the Celtic tradition, but I do understand other traditions as well. And, you know, these concepts aren't exclusive to Celtic history, but there are beings and there are ancestors and there are forces and deities that live within the earth, or the inner realms of the earth, the inner energetic structure of the earth, who are still alive and still present. And so it's these particular beings for me that you can associate. They do pop up in the mythological stories of like Taliesin in these lands, and beautiful Ceridwen, and these are beautiful beings, Rhianrod, the weavers of the web. These are all beings that you can actually speak to and communicate with and contact through particular places in the landscape or through nature. And so mythology is both ancient and present at the same time. So why is it relevant today, though? We wanted to kind of present this webinar because connecting to the mythology really kind of anchors you into your roots, anchors you into the reality, actually. And it sounds quite odd, but actually when you're connecting into those places, it just feels more real than the mundane world. And so that can feel quite dreamlike, actually, when you've been into the mythological landscapes. But these times that we're in are really tumultuous. And so we're really in changing times. You know, I don't think anybody can have missed the fact that you've got crazy stuff going on in the US, whether it's people perceive it as good or not. There's change here, and change is uncomfortable. And we've got a lot of change happening here in the UK as well. And so how can this mythology help us in today's world? If we look at a bigger timeline of things, you know, I watched a really great presentation by a guy called Bibhu Dev Misra. And he is this Indian guy who has researched, calculated the end of the Kali Yuga. And there's a lot of debate around the Kali Yuga timings and dates, because people have translated it from the Vedic scriptures, which are really, really old. And so Alan Watts says it ends in like 100 years' time. Other people say it ended in the 19th century. And there are other dates as well. Like there's wild variation in the kind of prediction or the measurement, this time frame. But of course it doesn't start and stop anyway. You know, things don't work like that. There's a long kind of bleed period where there's this transition. But Bibhu calculated based on astrology, which I thought was really interesting. Astrology and the precessional cycle, which is this big 26,000 year cycle, and that the earth moves through as it kind of like wobbles on its axis. And so, because we know that the ancients used that measurement as well. And so he's calculated the end of the Kali Yuga to be 2024 was the end. And then we've got this 15-year cycle from 2025 to 2040 that's like the transition where we're just literally transitioning, not into a golden age, unfortunately, but we're transitioning into an age of balance, where we've been in the Kali Yuga, where there's been this predominance of the darkness, where, you know, the dark forces have really had a stranglehold. I don't think we need to kind of explain that to anybody, do we? But we've incarnated at these times to see this change. I know I have. And so when I came across Bibhu's work, I was just like, oh, that resonates. And, you know, even if he's wrong, I'm happy to go with it, you know, because it feels right. because we're in this year is a transitional year, isn't it? The astrologer in the room.
Yes, and there's one thing that kept coming to me over and over and over last year as I was really tuning into the energies of this year. And again, there's a lot of conflation about these greater cycles. And one of the things that, people like to think of, everybody is talking about that movement from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, which is what Emma named as the precession of the equinoxes, right? And so there's a lot of discussion about when that actual movement is. But the conflation is that some people have worked up in their minds that the age of Aquarius is the golden age, but in actuality, it's not. Just like Emma said, the age of Aquarius is just that slight, I call it a feathering, stepward from, if we're at the very bottom of the barrel, it's that first step that one takes out of the mud. It's just the first step, but it's symbolic of that initial upward movement. And so we have a long way, thousands of years before we would even crest into and unfold into a quote unquote golden age. However, why this time period that we're in, and I'm going to break down the year that we're in right now being important in just a moment, but why this time period is so important is because I see it as we are the last line of defense, meaning that what we do matters, meaning that we are actually at that threshold moment of change when literally we are in the throes of changing from one time period to another, from one age and old reality to a next. So all of the actions that we take, both individually and collectively, really matter because we are laying the stones that others who come after us, our descendants, will hopefully be able to walk upon. And so speaking about this year in particular, 2025, many of us have probably maybe are aware of the why everybody is talking about this year, first of all, which has to do with the outer planets. The outer planets, meaning the planets that come after the asteroid belt. We all know those guys: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They move a lot more slowly than the guys on the inside of the asteroid belt. And so whenever they make big movements, like moving into a different sign, everybody pays attention. It's a big deal because it's an energy shift that is felt not just at the personal level, but at the global and collective level. Well, this year in 2025, what's happening is that pretty much every single one of those outer planets is changing signs. And most of the astrologers who do this great historical research have gone back all the way, I want to say before ancient Egypt, and they cannot find a time period where every single one of the outer planets was changing signs. So that in and of itself is extremely significant. And for any of you, yeah.
I think it's because they hold like the fabric of life, don't they? They hold like the structure and the background of our life, so it's all going to shift.
Yes, exactly. These outer planets are essentially weaving the structure of reality. And so this year in particular, those planets are shifting, but they're doing something interesting. Just like Pluto did the last couple of years, he moved back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius. Now he's finally in Aquarius. He's going to stay there. But everybody else is going to be the big guys. Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn are going to be putting one foot in to their next sign, and then they're going to be staying there for a few months, and then through the retrograde journey they're going to be moving back, and then they're going to be moving fully into these signs that are the progression of their journey next year, 2026. So why is this important, and what does this mean for us? 2025 is a bridge year. That means that it is literally this liminal space, this threshold point where the old reality is crumbling, there's a dissolution taking place, and the new reality is being created before our very eyes. And so the pieces that we put in place this year matter. They're really important because they're going to set us up for the next 20 years and beyond. And so, and through the obviously the next age, as we were just talking about in these bigger cycles. But for us personally, this is, I mean, we're talking about this is big, important movements. So what we do this year matters. So that brings us into why. So if what we do this year matters, then let's connect it back to our topic, which is what we're talking about, is the mythic. And based on all this, why do we want to connect with the mythic? And how is that, the mythic, rising up and calling us into connection with it? And why? What are the benefits of this work?
Well, we're not the only ones evolving. And so for me, because I work with the plant spirits a lot, the plants are evolving too. And of course, they sit within the earth. They don't sit in isolation in the earth. And so the earth is evolving too. And so we can learn and be supported and evolve in a more balanced way if we do it in co-creation with Mother Earth, if we do it in co-creation with nature. And so one of the things that I do a lot are plant initiations. And this is where a plant spirit will initiate you into a new way of being. So to help, some people call it healing, some people call it alchemy, some people call it, but it's basically inner transformation, so that we can really kind of move out of these limited perceptions that we've kind of inherited through these kind of like the past few thousand years, actually. So it's very deep work. So anybody who's doing work on themselves at this point in time is really doing a big service to humanity, because this is the hardest point to do work on yourself, because it's like that anaretic degree, isn't it, of the of a star sign, that the last degree of a star sign. It's like the culmination of the whole star sign is kind of on you if you've got a planet in that at that degree. And it's kind of like at this last degree of the Kali Yuga, we've got all of this heaviness on us. And so those of us who are wanting to evolve, it is really difficult. So those of us who are doing it, big kind of slap on the back, well done, because it's not easy at all. But the beauty of it is when we work with nature and we work with the land and we work with the forces in the land, we're actually really supported. And one of the things that has come through really is this the concept of working with the other world. The other world in Celtic tradition, and it's in many traditions, but we call it the other world in the Celtic tradition, or the underworld. And it's this kind of like this parallel reality that you access through your inner planes, and so you go inwards to access it. And so you can go into the etheric body of a tree and travel through the tree to take you to places. And of course, it works through our imagination. It works through the imaginative faculty, because we perceive energy, we perceive forces in the land, we perceive it through our imagination, but it doesn't mean it's just imagination. That's our creative imagery. Okay, and so there's a whole process of being able to determine what you've made up, because we all make stuff up, and what is actually an objective reality, or what is, it can be both. It can be subjective and objective at the same time. That's the beauty about the other world. And so working in the other world is in this mythological landscape. That's what it is. The other world, it's in all of the Mabinogi. It's in all of these ancient stories about journeys to the other world, because it is such a transformative place. And because whatever you carry in your heart, you meet in the other world. And so there are many ways to access the other world, through the plants, through sacred sites. Actually, you can connect to. We have many stone circles here in the British Isles, and other sacred places that you can where the veils seem thinner between the different worlds, and so we can access those realms. You've been to the British Isles quite a lot, haven't you? So. Yeah. How did you find accessing that kind of that landscape here?
So for me, my journey really, I was really initiated through land itself. Land and sacred sites were what brought me into the underworld and an experience of the mythic in a very early part of my journey. And so, one of the things that one of my practices early on was really listening to the whispers of the land that had resonance with my soul or with my blood or the crisscrossing of both, and then answering that call and making these pilgrimages to sometimes known sacred places and other times unknown. There was nothing written or understood about them, but I would just trust. I would trust the inner call of my own soul in combination with the call of the land. And when I would make these pilgrimages, of course, we all evolve in our maturity and consciousness. I think early on, looking back, I was quite hilarious. I would sometimes, I would have this sense of urgency and like, I was like this detective that I had to find out, what was the songs that were singing to me, metaphorically speaking. What were these stories that were rising up from the heart of the land to speak with the stories in my own soul? And over time, I started to cultivate patience where instead of trying to pull a story out, kicking and screaming, I would just show up. I would show up for myself and I would show up for the land. And it was through that dropping in with no expectation whatsoever that the story of the land would rise up. Now, I have to make this distinction here because, when we have any kind of psychic faculties, trained or untrained, what can happen is there's a lot of imprints in places, in everything. And so, if going back to what Emma was saying about discernment, we can tap into a many of the different imprints that are in a place. And, they can be anything from imprints of trauma and war or imprints of the story of the different cultures that were there. But what I'm talking about is and it's not that I never ran into those, but what I'm talking about here is dropping below culture into the mythic heart of the land where an ancient story begins to rise up. And that is the story that begins to engage us. And so this would happen to me at a lot of sacred sites is the mythic story of the land we would begin to talk to me. And then this magical thing happens where we realize that there's no separation between the story that it is being sung to you and your own story. Somehow you've stepped into the story of the land and now you're inseparable. And that's some of the beauty of this work, is that when we step into relationship with the mythic story of the land, we see that we are not separate from it, that it's been singing us back home into remembrance of who we are in relationship to the great web of life and the web of weird.
Absolutely. We are nature. And so if there is this mythology that lives in the land and in the earth, it lives within us too. And so, when for me, my access point has always been plants and trees and stone circles. I grew up in Cornwall, so I grew up around stone circles and know them well. But plants and trees are my passion, and I've worked with them in a shamanic way and in a magical sense, and for healing and self-transformation, and have met on many occasions these mythological beings from these other realms. Like we have traditions in this country of the Fae, of the She, of the Elven realm, and through working with plants, particular plants, you can actually access these particular realms. And so one of my main allies is the yew tree. So yeah, I love the yew tree. So I studied the U Mysteries for 5 years, and then once I'd graduated, I then put it into action and moved under a yew tree for 4 years. So I studied and was training with the yew tree for 9 years. And just the yew tree it holds the portal to the other world. That's what the yew tree is. It's this beautiful, beautiful, powerful portal that's just like eternity. And it holds that portal because it has been in our landscape for, well, it's so long they don't actually know how it even evolved. It's really, really old. And they call it the tree of eternity because it lives for so long. It can potentially just live on and on and on. But the beauty of the yew tree is that it doesn't allow any bullshit for a start. So there's no, you can't get away with anything with the yew tree because it reveals your true self. So what I found is over years of meditating, I literally meditated with this yew tree and did particular work. It literally strips you back of all your masks, all your conditioning, all your ideas about who you are, why you're here. It strips all that away. It's almost like it takes you apart and then gets rid of stuff that can be from like thousands of years ago. I really undid some ancient Egyptian stuff that I had to deal with. And I know we're in these times where we've come to kind of undo a lot of this work and to kind of free ourselves from all these entanglements. But the yew tree was my kind of mode of doing that. And so what I found eventually was that I just went back to the elven realm. That all the time I would just kept going back there, and eventually it would just became apparent that I've got this strong connection to that particular realm. And so I was meeting these beings. They were teaching me different healing methods. I lived in the middle of Wales, and so the beings and live very surface in the land. Whereas I find in England that the beings seem to be a lot more deeper into the land because it's so populated. Whereas in Wales, because there's not that many people there, the nature spirits and the beings in the land just seem to be a lot closer. Seems to be a lot more wild there. Although Penwith Moor is very wild, if anybody knows Cornwall. Anyway, so the yew tree really kind of helped me to understand my mythological origins and what good is that then? You just think, oh, well, great, it's just a concept, it's just a story, but it's not. It becomes this living force within you. And as a healer, what I found that if I go through an energetic process of before I start because I cleanse people's energy fields. I work remotely, and so I've been doing it for years, and so this is a byproduct of working with plants, as you just become really psychic, and so what I found was, though, that if I stepped into that role, my mythological role, that mythological energy within me, then my healing capacity and ability was just so much better, so much more precise. And when I kind of studied this and looked into it, what I realized what I was doing was moving into this state of being that is more in the mental body. So we work a lot in healing and in the psychic realms, in the astral space. But then this mythological aspect was coming in at this more mental level. It's like, I don't want to say higher, just a more kind of less dense kind of aspect of the energy body, but also
And like a
therefore,
refined level, right?
yeah.
Refined. Yeah.
Yeah, refined level, yeah. And it's a refined and more kind of subtle level of consciousness, absolutely. And then many people talk about this kind of quality, this super consciousness, if you like, our higher self, although higher self doesn't really say much, really. There's a whole spiritual science behind what this aspect of us is, this super consciousness is. And Rudolf Steiner talks about it as being that, we've kind of perfected our astral body. Any healers or psychic people, you can see other people's astral bodies very easily. and it has form, it has structure, it looks very similar to a being, a person. And but then what Steiner's saying is that what we're doing is we're evolving into giving form to this mental layer of our energy body. Well, that's fantastic, because as a healer, that's what I'm kind of working with, and trying to kind of like imagine myself in that space, putting energy into, moving my consciousness into that level, and giving form to myself so that I can do the healing work and operate in that realm. But part of that is where the mythology comes in. Our mythological aspect is part of that eternal aspect of us. We have a soul aspect that's just kind of for this lifetime, but then we've got this eternal spirit that is, conscious and kind of been partaken in many lifetimes at different timelines, dimensions, whatever. It's not linear per se. And so this mythological aspect of ourself is within that super consciousness, within that daemon, if you like. There's lots of different names for it, within ourself. And so I see it as part of our human evolution. So our past becomes our future. There's no kind of, it's not linear, like we're kind of like experiencing this linear time frame, but it's not. And so it's like this remembering of who we are, like we're memories of the processional cycle. Maybe it's a processional thing, I don't know. When we first come into the earth, maybe we do it in processional cycles, our kind of like times here, I don't know. But yeah, I'm just rambling there, but I hope you get what I mean.
No, it was perfect. This is all good. Okay, so I wanna anchor us back in this thing that you said, Emma, which is because I think it's a really fine point and important distinction to make, is that the energetic that we are talking about is this eternal living flame. It's this primordial, ancient energetic that both lives in the earth. In fact, it is the earth. It is her consciousness, right? This living dreamtime body. And then it is also at the heart of who we are. And so when we're talking about this ancient, one of the pitfalls that I tend to see in, especially in the spiritual community, is thinking that we're talking about like a return to the past, quote unquote. And I see also people that, people can get really caught up on past lives, and also honestly it's a phenomena that ends up creating a lot of disembodiment and spiritual escapism. And what we're talking about is actually how to live more fully human. So it's a remembrance of all that we are and all that it is, and then allowing that remembrance, which lives in like the ancient future seed code of the earth, that to really infuse us, to nourish us at the soul and spirit level, and to then allow us to bring our full selves, including all of these different aspects, our full soul, our full spirit, fully into the body, so that we can be a blessing in this world. And and so I just wanted to make that distinction for everyone, is that we're not talking about a return to the past. We're talking about something that's super anchored and super embodied and really relevant for where we are now. And
Yeah.
because yeah.
And not changing our identity. I didn't mean it in a sense that, oh, now I go around telling everyone I'm an elf. I don't mean, I don't mean that. Because there is a tendency for people wanting to escape into those stories as well. There's a lot of thing about, people saying they're from other planets and stuff, which is fine. But for me, I'm human. But part of the human story is these mythological realms. And actually, I'm quite, suspicious that, the elves and the little folk, they were called our cousins, because I think they are our original ancestors. So it's not that I'm trying to kind of like swap one identity for another. It literally, it's a living force within the entirety of being human.
And so when you begin doing this work, it's almost it cannot be prevented that at some point you are going to come full force into connection with your mythological roots. And it creates such an anchoring of belonging, of who we are across time and space, and then an anchoring of who we are in relationship to the dream of the earth and what she is trying to remember us, what she is trying to help us recall in this moment, that we are not just these bodies. We are not just this mundane reality. We are both. We are spirit and matter. And so this is this time period, and again going back to the 2025 of the weaving, right? Because there's a weaving of this liminal reality. And so this is a beautiful opportunity for us also to weave at a personal level of how do we weave spirit and matter? How do we bring in the mythic of that ancient place with and allow it to bridge into who we are now to make it relevant to this time and this moment to be of service.
So, and you work with plants and flowers as well. And so, do you find that you connect into those mythic realms through any plant or tree? Because for me, there are specific kind of plants and trees that do kind of almost specific things. A lot of them are gateway. I mean, there are so many plants that are gateways into the other world in the British Isles, and so many trees. But some do it better than others. Obviously, the oak tree is like known as the druidic tree of the three worlds. Even the primrose is a gateway into the fairy realm. And so when you take the essence or the tea or something, you can actually access those realms through those plants. And so how do you work with the mythic with your plants and your essences?
So, with the essences, I work in a little bit of a different way, which has changed over time. A long, long, once upon a time, because my journey was such that I was crash coursed into the mythic by having an underworld fairy initiation on the tour, where one that I would say I was very ill prepared for, and it set my life into this tailspin for many years following that experience. And so, but over time, I integrated it bit by bit, one step of healing after the other. And so early on, what I would do was create experiences for people to also experience the other world of fairy, and to have this living interaction with the other world of fairy. However, over time, what I found was that it was more stabilizing and grounding if somebody actually starts out with the plants first. And looking back in my earlier journey, I wish that I had had the support of the plant realms and the flower realms and the tree realms that I have now. And so what the way that I work now is that I help people through working with essence combinations. So essences, like Emma was saying, she has a beautiful apothecary, by the way. Essences are these vibrational signatures of the plant, tree, flower, or aspect of nature. And so I work with a combination of these that align with the person's soul frequency to help them remove some of the issues and unresolved trauma and unresolved egoic structures that are keeping them from remembering who they are. So once we get those out of the way, what I find is that there's this natural process of just them coming back online of remembering. And then from there, it's just working animistically, in relationship with the trees, the land. And I actually listen to their soul and see what, meaning the soul of the person, to see who is calling and guiding them. So even though I may work with for example, I also love you. I also deeply love the oak tree. And so I have these allies that are they are my partners in all things wonderful and beautiful. And yet, I find that sometimes a person that I'm working with actually has a an ally through a soul connection that they haven't yet remembered that comes forward that may not be my one of my main gals or guys in terms of the plant world. So I will listen to the plants to see who comes forward, and then I weave them a formula to support them in their remembrance. That's kind of yeah, that's the little bit of the distinction of how I work.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm currently working with poisonous plants, but the essence of them. And so they take you to a completely different part of the other world. They take you into like proper underworld initiatory places. And so in those so each of the plants, even though they're kind of like gateways into these otherworld and mythological spaces, they actually take you into different places within that. There are many kingdoms in in the other world. And so we can by working with different plants, we can have different experiences, or different trees, we can have different experiences of this mythological space.
So, is there any other story that you think might want to be shared of how we've worked with the mythic and how, yeah, how the mythic has journeyed us?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I mean, for me, it really has been a journey with the yew tree. That's my mythological journey, but it's through the yew tree that I met my teacher on the Isle of Man, and he has a very similar spiritual lineage, and so I ended up working with magic from that realm, and healing from that realm, and obviously essences. I think the essences, plant spirit essences, are originally from the fairy healing tradition, and so the essences, which are the vibration of the plant, which is kind of like held in water, and then fixed with a bit of alcohol. That remedy, that form of connecting with the plants, is so old that they just don't know when it even began. And so for me, I feel it comes from those. And I think I was reading a book by Ryan Foxwood or R.J. Stewart, and they said the same thing, that it's just these essences and these kind of like healing modalities have come through from the other world, from these mythological beings and places, and so it just makes them kind of like a true tradition. And here in the British Isles, they nearly got outlawed. They nearly got banned. They're so like, so ridiculous. But luckily, the British Flower and Vibrational Essence Association fought for that, and so now we can still sell them, but we have to sell them as food supplements. But that's fine, as long as we can, we can kind of sell them, because it really helps people to connect to themselves, to nature, to these other realms, and really helps people to move through stuff. So, and there are different types of these essences. You can get your kind of like your normal batch remedies that just kind of like, just, I'm angry, take some holly, I'm not angry anymore. That's a bit kind of, it's not really kind of very evolutionary or kind of like insightful. And so if you work shamanically with these plants, they actually bring things up for you to look at and for you to resolve. They support you and help you and protect you and hold you, but they do, it's for you to work through, to bring conscious awareness to. And so by removing all these veils, by working with the plants, doing plant initiations, doing plant diets, spending time with the plants, spending time in these places, you'll just, and it takes time, doesn't it? I'm not saying it's a quick, easy thing. It's not, because we're stubborn. We don't like change. We don't like being out of our comfort zone. And so it can take time to remove all the masks, but the more masks you remove, then the kind of the closer you get. And if you've got intention to connect to that mythological aspect of yourself, then you're more likely to kind of encounter that in nature, because when you're working with plants, when you're working with healing, it's all about intention, because we have free will, and it's always a partnership. It's always a reciprocal partnership. It's kind of a biofeedback mechanism going on between you and the plants, and so you're involved in that. It's not a passive experience, and so you have to have the intention to want to actually connect to those landscapes. And so for me, yeah, it's not something I kind of, well, I connect to that aspect within myself through my clearings when I do my healing work, every week. But in terms of journeying into those lands, we do shamanic journeys. Can go into different realms, the drum journey, etc. But it's not something I kind of like seek out regularly. I don't think it's healthy to spend too much time in those realms. We can soak up to a lot of astrality by being in those other realms. And, it is the land of the dead. The dead live there too. And so we don't want to put too much of our energy into that space. We have to, we're living. And so we're on this side of the veil. And so we have to remain as much, kind of in kind of balance within this body. And so yeah, it's been a long learning journey and process. And but yeah, I've experienced some beautiful places and some amazing beings and things in the other world there are way more beings and types of beings than we have here on earth. There seems to be way more beings, because they're not limited to physicality in the way that we are.
So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because in terms of the vastness of the inner landscape, because the last tiny little story that I will share in relationship to this mythic conversation is the one of New Avalon. And so I've kind of grazed over some of my other earlier aspects of my journey that were very much a remembrance into my mythological roots and fae. And I recounted that. I feel like I've spoken that story so many times, and the stories anyways, they can dissipate after a while in terms of their power. So if you want to experience that story, you're more than welcome to read my book, Initiation, My Fairy Soul Awakening. It was an account of it's a magical memoir and a travel log, and it's exciting. And so I'll send you there, but I'm going to tell you about present day and how I came to be here, because this is actually, in some ways, I want to say it's the culmination of my mythological journey, and in other ways there is no destination here. That is another ego trap, and so we have to remember that it's all about the journey, and we're constantly evolving and iterating on ourselves. And so I traveled through many lands, like I said, searching and finding, and I was always in listening mode and receiving, and there was this interaction of story always happening with the land, with me. And it was about 10 years ago where this land that I'm living on now found me. And it was one of those last minute moments where it was, the door is closing. We had an offer in on another house, and we almost closed. And yet at the last minute, the spirit stuck its foot in the door before it closed and said, wait a minute, wait a minute. And so as soon as I went to visit this land and the home, I knew that the land had found me. And so the first couple of years that I was in this place, I just spent time listening, just like I had been listening to all of these different lands and all of these different beings across all these different, continents and places. And now I was sitting in one place, which for me was also an interesting practice, because I wasn't used to sitting in one place and wasn't used to really having a home. And so I was just listening for the first few years. And then I started to hear the whispers of the land itself. And the beings that were here, the actual living forces, the guardians of this place that were connected to the different members of non-human non-human consciousness. So yes, the nature spirit consciousness, but also beings that are the she, the elven folk, the little people, the Yunwi Sundi, these other beings, the Sasquatch of this land started to whisper. And so, after a period of time in all of this listening, what ended up happening is that the dream of the land began to talk to the dream in my own soul. And before I knew it, we were co creating this sanctuary, garden, and sanctuary forest that is dedicated to the co-creative partnership of beings of Gaia. And so there are native beings here that are actually part of these lands, but then there are also beings here that have come as part of this relational experiment rather. And that's what I weave and work with each and every day. And why I call it New Avalon is because it's not because I imposed something of my old, this name, this cute name on this land that has nothing to do with it. No, because it's symbolic. And the land itself actually gave me the name because it's symbolic of what Emma and I have been talking about this whole time, which is that it is an ancient energy. It is an ancient energy, primordial. We're talking about pre-Atlantean, even pre-Lemurian in some cases, going way, way back. And at that, the heart of that is spread out in all of the earth. We can touch into that no matter where we are. And it was that energy that then rose up through the weft, like the weaving weft of this time and place. And so that's why it's called New Avalon. So it's this. So that's one of my most recent mythic experiences of what is possible when we listen to the heart of the land, the spirits of the land, and then we work in co-creative partnership with them.
Beautiful, beautiful. We have a tradition over here. A lot of people work with dragons here. And yeah, because the dragon forces in the land and all the elemental dragons. And yeah, so,
And
and
the dragons have
giants.
been getting louder and louder each year, haven't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, more and more people actually are able to tune into those realms, I find. Yeah. And are having dragons as allies.
Yes.
Unruly dragons. They can be difficult to keep under control.
Yeah, and they require a lot of power, don't they? Like
Yeah.
it requires your own initiation with coming to terms with your own personal power and then also a healing around your relationship with power. So anytime that we've been out of integrity with our own power, where we've given our own power away in this life or in another lifetime, anytime where we've misused or abused power, we've all done it. We've all been on both sides of the fence. So nobody should be on their high horse, right? So it's an opportunity to really come into deep relationship with power in the most integral way. And then we become a true, I think, ally. We make ourselves worthy to be good allies with the dragons. Otherwise, they're just going to cause chaos in our lives.
Go around burning everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why, I kind of talk about this stuff, and one of the reasons why I kind of, do webinars like this is because my fundamental kind of driving force for my life and my work is that, I've seen the effect on me of being seen by another world being, or being seen by a plant spirit, being seen and recognized and communicated, because I teach plant communication. And so when people see that, seen or communicate with a plant spirit, it completely changes people's lives. It did for me. And so that connection is what we've lost, that big connection, because it just felt like I think I cried for hours afterwards. It was like I'd just come home. And it's like, oh, I do belong, because we are so told that we are, by so often, that we're parasites on this earth when we're not. We're children of this earth, and that we're so disconnected from our land, from our original languages, from our true cultures, that our indigenous natures, that it's created a lot of problems in people. But by just all manner of things, but just by being seen by something and touching into a force that is, and recognizing that you're part of something that's much bigger than you, it really heals people, and it really helps us recognize who we are, why we're here, what we need to do to work on ourselves to make us better fit into that world. And so yeah, I mean, for me, that's my driving force. And I don't know about you, what's your reason for all of your work?
I do this work because enchantment is the medicine of the now. Enchantment is what feeds and nourishes our soul and what feeds and nourishes our spirit. And so when we infuse ourselves with the medicine of enchantment, with the medicine of the mythic, and then we bring that back into our world, into our communities, we actually contribute to the healing. It's not through our not through our minds and what our egos think, but it's through that truly revitalized and re-enlivened human ensouled person that can come and then be of service, and we truly can co-create the living reality of beauty and kindness that we want to see in the world.
That's beautiful. And that's actually a really beautiful place to end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, if people want to connect a little bit more with you, actually, Adimira, have you got anything coming up for people to join in?
Yes. Yes, you can pop on my newsletter to make sure you don't miss anything. If you want to stay in the know, then definitely subscribe. This is my book's third birthday this month. So I will be celebrating my book initiation's third birthday. I'm going to be throwing a virtual tea party celebration that everyone can come to. I'll have fun giveaways and there'll be readings. And I'm also going to be sharing some chapters that actually didn't get published, and talking, anybody who's a creative or a writer, we can also talk a little bit about the creative process. And yeah, it's just going to be loads of fun. It's this month on the 19th, so that's coming up. And then the second thing is that I am opening my home for the first time in a very long time for private New Avalon retreats in the spring, so starting April of this year. So if that's something that you want to experience, which is coming to this land and just experiencing the co-created mythic beauty that has been cultivated over this last 10 years between me and all the spirits, you can have an experience with the medicine that has been cultivated here. So I would love to explore that. You can just email me at connect@diamirarose.com if you're interested.
Oh, beautiful. That sounds fab.
And what about you, Emma? Tell us what you've got going on.
Well, I've got a plant initiation. I'm doing starting on the 12th of Feb. I mean, there's still time for UK people to join because I send out a bottle of Enchanter's Nightshade essence. We're working with Enchanter's Nightshade, that beautiful Cercea luticiana. It's a beautiful woodland plant. And then the Language of Plants and Trees online class as part of my school is later this month as well. So if you want to learn some fundamental and really effective plant communication skills, then you can join that as well. And I've got my new moon gathering every month, which is just donation basis, so you can drop in and kind of tune into the tides of the moons and the seasons with us in a community gathering. That's always really nice. So yeah, I hope you can join us again, and I hope you have enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for your gratitude and for your patience and attention, and yeah, we will see you again sometime.
Thank you all so much.